All right, all right. It is.
Where did Bernard go?
Gotten back together. The gang's here. Circle City, Goats and Dogs, episode 4, senior year of high school. Here we come. How's everybody doing tonight? Woodwood, how's your world, Woodwood?
Wide open, brother, wide open.
Wide open. Well, we're going to try and keep you awake tonight. 17 is here and he is awake. 63, how are you doing tonight?
Living the dream. I'm just trying to figure out if Shane's already in bed.
Frankly, I think it's another one of those hostage videos. I think he is in bed and we just haven't seen the newspaper yet. And we got the ace, the tennis pro. How you doing tonight, Chris?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Good deal. Good deal. It's been a few weeks since we were last together. The first 3 episodes brought us all the way up through or up to our leading into our senior year of high school. And it was a memorable reason for many, many reasons. But where I want to start with this is actually the spring of our junior year. It's that time we're thinking about college. Well, we've been thinking about schools, but now we're getting a little more serious. We're starting to visit schools on some fun weekends. We're applying to schools, at least coming up. We're taking the ACT, SAT, whatever it is. And I'll start with you, Shane. Was there any doubt in your mind where you were going to college, even by that time, by your junior year?
No, I pretty much knew where I was going. It was kind of strange. I hate to even admit this, but grew up in a Alabama household, pulling for them. See, I'm struggling to even say it.
I know who Wayne Tadlock rooted for.
And chose to attend Auburn University and fell in love and found my place at Auburn. And I know Chris Maddox is loving this too, because he gets a kick out of all this. But and now, hey, I'm a diehard War Eagle fan.
But growing up, Maddox was really the only lean-to at that time. Maybe Bittner. Arnold, I don't think really cared that much, did he?
No, I think he was an Alabama fan as well.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess you're right about that. But back then, you know, think about the way the two schools were playing, how their seasons were going during our high school years. Obviously, the Iron Bowl, as it is today, it was, at least when you're in high school in South Alabama, it was even bigger. Oh, yeah. Coach Bryant was still coaching at the time when we were entering high school, or he had just was retiring.
Yeah.
And I want to say, was it Barfield? I can't remember who was the coach in the early 80s for Auburn, but they were starting to come on, and then Pat Dye came on.
Yeah.
Pat Dye was 83, 84.
He started in 81.
81, yeah.
So we were.
I would go to the Auburn games with Brother Bob Baggett.
Mm-hmm.
He would take me in high school to go to the Auburn games to try to convert me to an Auburn fan. And I got to meet all those guys, which was great. And Pat Dye and all that stuff. So it was amazing.
Okay, back to me. So
I'm so glad you had that nap.
I had the intent of going to the School of Architecture, but actually that summer I talked to someone that I was working with actually, and they were telling me about the building science degree, and I changed it, and that was a great decision on my part. Never looked back.
Do you guys remember, and maybe it was later into our senior year that we all took the trip to Tuscaloosa, but do you remember taking trips, not with our parents anymore, but, you know, going to Auburn or going to Florida State or you know, any of the regional schools just to see our older friends there? Did you guys take any of those trips, or do you remember any trips that we took?
Yeah, I took a trip to Tuscaloosa, which would have been I guess in the fall of our senior year. Mm-hmm. I went up there one weekend with John Coleman and Maria Baker and Elizabeth Tucker, or Elizabeth Ball at the time.
And there was a lot more of us too. We just all didn't ride together. Carrie went, I went. Rufus, did you? I don't remember.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. No, I didn't get
Yeah,
invited to
I
that.
don't remember. I don't remember. I don't think he could leave Dothan at the time.
That's right. That's right. He
For
was
reasons
he
that I
was
can't-
tethered. He
Me
was
and
tethered.
Rufus may have been doing something
For-
at
for
that
reasons-
time while y'all were
For
gone.
reasons that we're all contractually obligated not to reveal.
Well, Rufus, at what point did you get clarity that Birmingham Southern was going to be your destination?
Well, going back to the previous comments, you know, when you said looking at colleges, Bernard, I didn't look. I was too preoccupied. So my sister was at Sanford,
And what he's hinting around is girls, guys. Just to be clear,
you know,
girl. It was always girls, and it still
it was
it's
it
girls.
was one. So let me say that. But I did, you know, I was pre-med and was focused on that. And so I knew I didn't want to go. I was not one to go to the big universities or go way out of state. I knew that. So really came down to UAB, Birmingham Southern, and Sanford. And Sanford was a great visit. I did go up there. Stacy was there. My sister. I did go up there a couple of times, and then I did go to Birmingham Southern, which was very fraternity. And so we did I did a couple of summer visits up there with a bunch of them, which was fun and had a great time. And ultimately, the only reason I ended up at Birmingham Southern was they had 30 pre-med students 2 years prior to me going, and all 30 got into med school. 29 pre-law students got into law school, so their acceptance rate into the graduate school afterwards was very high. So that's why I went there, and they gave me a bunch of money to come there. So that was the big deal.
And Maddox, we know that you took a year at Wallace to play before you ended up in Auburn.
Yep.
And was it, I guess, when you were making your decision to play tennis, did you ever consider a second year at Wallace, or you just knew that you were going to end up in Auburn?
Yeah, I went into that first year and played tennis and enjoyed it. Coach Oppert, who we've talked about from baseball, Coach Oppert was actually the tennis coach at Wallace that I played for.
Is there any sport that man cannot coach?
None whatsoever. I told you a couple episodes ago, that guy's a legend, and he still is, in my opinion.
He still is. He still is.
Awesome to be a tennis coach to play for. Fantastic memories of that. But it was just after a year, it was time. You know, it was just time to get out of Dothan and move on to college life. And I realized playing for Coach Oppert for a year that tennis was not going to be something that I was going to be able to do for a long-term thing anyway. I was a decent high school player. And you know, decent enough to play for a year with Coach Wallace or Coach Oppert at Wallace, but I was not ever going to be a threat to make the tour or play professionally, and really was not much of a threat to play collegiately past junior college. So, you know, sometimes you just realize you're at the end of the old road, and it's time to move on to the next step, and that's what it was. It was a great year. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I got some basic classes out of the way. And then, of course, I moved up to Auburn, where I lived with Shane Wood and Murray Johnson in a single wide trailer. I lived in the closet of the
He lived
mobile
in the
home.
third bedroom in a trailer, if you can just
Yeah.
imagine. We all have walk-in closets larger.
Yeah.
I could touch each end of the room every day I woke up with one finger. It was not the biggest room I've ever.
It was a 2-bedroom trailer, and you were in the closet.
He was in the cell, the jail cell.
That's correct.
That's
That's
funny.
correct.
That's
But it
funny.
was awesome. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was awesome. So
Well,
yeah.
It was. You guys know me. I always wanted to play baseball in college, and I'd had a decent high school career first 3 years. But going into our senior year, we really, for our football program, we really had a special group of older players, juniors and seniors. And you may remember we changed the offense. We had one of the top players in the state, if not the Southeast, in Lawrence, had all kind of talent. And it was football season, so I was focused on football. And that was not during the time when we had year-round travel baseball. We predated all of that stuff. And I played Legion ball with Arnold. We played for Coach Frichter that one year. And going into football season that summer, I just lived, ate, breathed. All it was just football, because this was it for us. This was our senior year. And I didn't know where I was going to school. I was hoping some universities or colleges were looking at me for baseball. But as we know, it was later in the season when we just kind of caught lightning in a bottle in November. And we'll get to that in a minute. Was I even on somebody's really football radar? But I remember we had Rufus and Shane. Do you remember when we had the conditioning testing leading up to, and we had to run a mile? And if you were under a certain weight, you had a certain time period. If you were over a certain weight, you had another time period. And I had gotten to about 178 pounds, which I'll show you my senior portrait in a minute. And that was about 180. And I hadn't been there in quite a while. But I just remember I was
150 now. I love that, Bernard. That's awesome.
I was by far the best shape of my life going into there. And I was really just focused on football. I was looking forward to our senior year and all the goofiness that we were doing in the summer when we weren't working out. But I just have vivid memories of that time period. It was as if we just lived at the school that summer, for the most part, working out. Guys, we got a whole bunch of folks in the house already. I got to give some shout outs. We got Carlisle Morse, who says to tell you guys hello. We got Tracy Cornegie Lewis, Autumn Baggett Toussaint, Gina Grant, Melinda Coleman Cheney. Thank you guys for all stopping by for our little chat session here.
Yeah, I saw Gina at a ribbon cutting this week. She was talking about this program.
Oh, Wood, you're the talk of town, baby. You are the talk of town. But we're hitting our senior year, which is the fall of '85 into the spring of '86. And Shane, how excited were you for football season coming up?
Oh, I dreaded every football season. I don't. I dreaded that mile like a beating. I'm telling you.
Yeah, you beat it by like a minute and a half. I mean, why would you?
I don't know. I might have been one of those guys running after practice that didn't make his mile.
I don't know if Chris Holmes will remember, but he and I finished at the same time. And for me to finish
he was jogging backwards.
He may not want you to share that, Bernard.
Yeah, I think he was on his hands. I think he was running on his hands.
Apparently Chris was slacking that season too, like me.
Rufus, what was your mindset? Do you remember?
And if you remember, so my junior year, my sophomore year, I came in and I didn't make it by a long shot. And for the people that are watching, you had to run it after practice till you made it, and that was in full pads. Yeah. So it was awful. So my disdain was I learned early to do it. So my summers, my junior year and my senior year, I would run to Hardee's and go through the drive-through, with my foot, bang on the wire, and I'd get breakfast, and then I would run home. So I made my mile. I actually ran with the DBs my senior year because I was so scared of not being able to make it. Being an offensive lineman, I had 12 minutes, and I was running it under 6. So I was, I learned my lesson early that I got sick really quick after doing all that stuff.
Maddox, I know that the main season, the varsity season for tennis is in the spring, but did you play in the fall? Did y'all have I'm going to call it a club season or some other kind of an off season tournament?
Yeah. So Lane Dykes was our coach for the tennis team the whole time I was at Northview, and he just expected us to play in the fall. There was no regiment where we had a workout session or everybody. It just was you were expected to play so that when spring came around, you had your game in shape and you're ready to go and be competitive. And we were. Northview had a pretty strong tennis team back then, and we did well. We made it to the state. There's I don't know, the state tournament's at Lagoon Park in Montgomery. And we went to the state, I want to say all 4 years if we didn't go all 4 years, we went 3 of the 4 years that I was in school. So we had a very strong team, and we were, now we didn't ever really crush it at state because, you're there playing against kids from Vestavia and Mountain Brook who can hit the ball with their left hand as well as they can hit the ball with their right hand, Um, but it was fun. We were pretty dominant for our area of the state.
Were there formal competitions or tournaments, or was it just more of, kind of describe the competitions at that time?
Yeah, so you had it kind of worked. There were 9 points available in a match, right? You had 6 singles players seeded 1 through 6, and then you had 3 doubles teams that played, and each match was worth a point. So the first team to get to 5 points won the match.
Mm-hmm.
And we had basically the same area that football had. And so how you did in the area would dictate how you did in what's called a regional or sectional tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you finish first or second in your sectional tournament, or if you won it individually, even though your team didn't, if you won your seed,
Mm-hmm.
you got to go to play in the state. So that's how that worked.
Well, I remember the first weeks of classes beginning. We're now the kings of the school. And I don't know if that really changed things, because in all candor, when you play on the varsity football team, you kind of feel that way walking around, or at least I did at times. But now that you're seniors and you're on the football team, you really are kind of under a bit of a microscope, so to speak, within the school. The teachers want you to do well. You've got lots of encouragement from all the classmates and other kids in the school, and by the time you're a senior, you don't know who a lot of those freshmen and sophomores are. Now, my brother Rob was a freshman, so I kind of knew some of his friends, but I was never a morning person, if you remember. And I used to take Chase Letcher, who lived behind us, and Robert to school, and I wouldn't let them talk the whole way to school. It was horrible. Now, it wasn't the Blake Hall Jesse's Girl music up, but I found something to play. But it was probably more along the lines of who sang "Rock You Like a Hurricane"? Was that the?
Oh, that was the Scorpions.
Scorpions. Probably Scorpions. I think we had a little. Anyway, those things are just kind of flooding back to me at times. But poor Chase and Rob, those guys didn't stand a chance riding to school.
But
Bernard.
But you're right, Bernard. The each year you're in high school, when you're a freshman, you're just walking around thinking, praying. None of the older class people will ever even. You don't even want them to acknowledge you, right? Just Lord, let me get through this day and not be humiliated. And then your 10th grade year, you're like, thank God I'm not a freshman,
right?
But you're still kind of down on the totem pole. Your 11th grade year, you finally start to get a little street cred about you. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, when you're a senior, you think you are just, you're it on a stick, right? I mean, you don't even, it's like you just said, Bernard. I have a sister that was a freshman when we were seniors, so I knew a couple of her friends, but for the most part, I agree with you. They're just freshmen, right? They're not worthy of our time. So, which is stupid, but that's how we felt back then.
Yeah, it's a hierarchy. Now, Sherry's how young or how many grades behind us?
She was 1 year behind us.
Okay, so you knew. Well, we knew a lot of those juniors just because they're just a year behind us. But yeah, it's a whole different mindset your senior year.
Oh yeah.
This is our final go around with the football program, and of course we start out 1-3. Yay, team! Lawrence breaks his wrist or his arm in the first series, third play against Robert E. Lee. And Shane, I know you're going to remember, why did we play on Labor Day on Monday afternoon?
There was a hurricane that came through.
And it kept pushing and pushing. Yeah, we went from Friday to Saturday to Monday. And you guys may remember our first 3 games were played within 10 days stretch. We played Monday, Friday, and then the next Thursday or Friday.
Thursday, yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of nuts to play 3 varsity 6A games in a 10-day stretch. But we get to homecoming, which is Central of Thomasville. They're ranked number 9 in the state of Georgia. And our season turned around because Lawrence came back. And it galvanized the team. It galvanized the fan base. And Chris, I want to start with you, Maddox, about being in the stands our senior year. We're not starting out so hot, but by the time we get to homecoming, that really is the turning point for the rest of the year. It was a 19-0 win by us.
Yeah, you guys didn't start out well, but you also, Bernard, should have mentioned who y'all played in 3 of those first 4 games. You were playing perennial powerhouses from around the Dothan area, and it was a slow start for you guys, but it was one of those deals where I just remember thinking, if Lawrence comes back, we're going to be fine. Lawrence comes back, we're going to be fine. And lo and behold, that's exactly kind of how it went down. And it just got better and better and better from the student section standpoint. And really, until the playoffs started for football, the only downside from a dorky fan situation was when we lost to Dothan High, in the regular season.
Which later turned out to be a blessing.
Actually. Exactly. Well, they did us a favor in the playoff.
4th game of the year, we lose in our first of 5 overtimes that year. We lose to Fort Walton, 24-17. We actually I was wrong about the score. It was 23-0 that we beat Central.
Yeah, I was going to say the D came on in that game too. That was like where the D just blossomed, and from then on.
And here I am, post game, varsity quarterback, dating the cheerleader, and I'm going to drive the coolest car that we knew to homecoming, a DeLorean in 1985. And so what happens on the way to the dance? The battery dies. Thankfully, Arnold is behind me. Anyway,
apparently the flux capacitor wasn't working that night.
Yeah, he needed 1.21 gigawatts, and
I didn't put enough in.
Way to go, McFly! Way to go.
I'm just going to remind you, Bernard, that was more than once that you had to be jumped off on that car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for a hot minute, it was a cool look until it wasn't.
And I will say, for people who don't know, Lawrence broke both arms and both bones in his arm and had a steel plate put in.
Yeah.
And came back 6 weeks later. I mean,
remember he wore that big blue cover, that Velcro fucking deal that let him play, but he had no mobility for several weeks. And we relied on him tremendously for ball carrying. He passed a lot.
Yeah.
He just did everything for us.
But talk about tough. That's what I was saying. Talk about tough. Break both bones in your arm and then come back 6 weeks later.
We had started a brand new offense. It was the Houston Gamblers run and shoot. We were not clicking yet, but we had athletes in the backfield and the skill position. And their athleticism overcame my inabilities to get the ball where it needed to be in the first part of the season. And it's absolutely true. We then played Enterprise. And if you remember, it was a double overtime, 20-19. And I want to say it was either Chris Parker or Willie Banks made the game-saving tackle in that second overtime. But thank goodness we finally beat those guys from Enterprise. And that, more so to me than the homecoming game the week before, that was such an emotional win, beating Enterprise. They had beat our brains out for years, including either our freshman or sophomore year. They beat us 44-0 in Enterprise. And they had all those athletes. They had running backs that went to Florida. They had a lineman that went to Alabama.
There,
Yep. Then we take on
got athletes, Bernard. They do. They got a kid who's going to play. They got a couple kids that are going to play Division I football next year. They continually generate athletes out of that place. It's crazy.
And I don't know the population of Coffee County, but aren't they've got to be the biggest, or I know they're the only 7A school, but they got to be the biggest public school around.
Yeah, no question about that. Yeah.
We beat Foley in overtime. We crushed Blunt. Then it takes us to the Dothan game. Chris Lee, what do you remember about that loss, that overtime loss to Dothan High?
Gosh, I just remember being devastating, and I remember the T-shirts afterwards. They had T-shirts, and then they had T-shirts after the state championship. If you remember that, we beat the state champions.
Yeah.
I don't know what didn't work in that game. It just didn't work. I was only back for my injury for 2 games because I didn't play in the homecoming game. I had broken the 2 ribs off my sternum and only stayed out one week, and still trying to heal, trying to keep everything. But I remember that being devastating because, I did know a few people on the opposing team and or cheerleader team that loved to rub it in. So Julia was best friends with somebody over there, my cousin, and it was devastating. It was like, ugh. Now I agree, it did work out for us in the end, but it was I didn't like it. I did not like losing
what
that
it was is a tremendous number of fantastic athletes on both sides of
Oh yeah, they were great people.
Dothan High sent a whole bunch of folks to Division One, Division Two as well, and they had a very good team. In fact, they were the area champs that year by virtue of their win over us. Obviously, the next week, the 19-0, we beat Ozark Carroll. That gave us second place, which switched or helped us in the seeding of the playoffs. And not to go too far down a rabbit hole or a rabbit trail here, we were paired up with Opelika, the number 1 seed in the 6A playoffs. We were the number 32 team, the last place team. And as Coach Parrish tells it, when the coaches all went that next Saturday, the week before the playoffs, and they're calling all the teams, they called out Northview right before Opelika, and Coach Parrish, acknowledges, stands up, and has to say maybe the record or whatever it is. Opelika stands up and snickers, number 1, 10-0. Little did they know what would happen the following week. Shane, take us to that following week, those opening playoff game in Opelika. What do you remember?
I just remember the rowdy crowd, and it stayed so close, and just how ecstatic the celebration after the game that, I mean, now did that one go to overtime as well?
No, we won it late.
Okay. I knew it was something happened late.
It was a late touchdown by Hogan.
Okay.
We went on the left side, just so y'all know. We were driving on the left side. For those of you who know what that means, we were running the ball on the left side. So yeah.
So Chris got in somebody's way like he was supposed to and slowed somebody down.
One of the themes from our senior year of football, and it can't be overstated, that when you have the quarterback who outweighs his 2 tackles, something is not in balance, because I outweighed Pat, Fitch, and Rufus, and something's wrong there. Because
just so you know, Bernard, that's the reason why I have all the sleep stuff and the pain meds. Yeah, from trying to protect.
I'll once again say thank you. Rufus, what do you remember besides being such a protector of the left side that night?
I will tell you that game meant a lot in my world. So I remember several things. I remember pulling out when we did our motion, and I remember Sean Smith played for Opelika, and he was tremendous. He was a great athlete.
Parade All-America, high school All-America that year.
Yeah, and I pulled out, and neither one of us were going to give, and I put my face right in his chest to block, and I swear he didn't move. he probably just discarded me like a rag doll, but we both fell to the side. And I remember coming back to the huddle. Bernard, do you remember this? And we get back in the huddle, and I just remember everything being very clear. And, I was like, this is like unreal. And I remember you looking at me like, what is wrong with you? Well, I didn't have a face mask, and I wore a big face mask. I wore a cage. And Sean Smith walked up to our huddle and handed me my face mask. I broke every bolt on my helmet. And I remember going off to the side, Coach Sellers yelling, going, "Get him a helmet, get him a helmet." I remember that was probably one of the hardest hits ever that I encountered. Wayne Blyesma was the linebacker, if you remember. I don't know if everybody remembers the other reason why I remember this game so well.
Yeah,
My
who?
wife,
Yeah,
my
who was
wife
in the
was-
stands for the other high school that night?
believe it or not, she wasn't there.
Oh no!
Yeah, she wasn't a supporter. She wasn't there. And going back to previous ones, Chris Maddox was the class president. You remember Chris Maddox who ran against you? Kenneth Franks, who had me come up and be his spokesperson. Kenneth, I hope I'm not violating anything here. He actually had a bad encounter there, and
Well, Frank, it was in the newspaper. He was stabbed.
Yeah,
he
it
was
was
stuck.
In a
It
scuffle.
was rough.
Um,
It got rough
yeah.
after the game.
With
Yeah,
other
it got
people.
rough. So if you don't think I don't give my wife a lot of grief over that her high school, actually stabbed ours. And the other thing I'll remember, I actually went by the ER that night. I rode home with mom and dad. That was the only night I rode home with them, and we actually went by the ED that night. So that game was rather impactful.
Maddox, I know a couple of weeks later you were in Montgomery with us, but did you guys bring a car up? Did y'all come up to Opelika?
Yes, sure did. At the time, that senior year, Martha McGowan and I were seeing each other, and she worked at the bank, and so they wouldn't let her off early. She had to work till 6 o'clock on Fridays, and so we were getting a late start to every playoff game that was on the road, and we made it up to we got to Opelika just in time for probably the midway through the fourth quarter. So it was just about over when we got there.
You got there at the right time, but
The whole game.
I remember clock strike zeros. We upset the undefeated team. And I remember it was either Coach Parrish or Coach Johnson. Get your helmets on, get in the bus.
Yeah.
And we did. And the bus is rocking. The bus, I don't know if you remember this, but we're having rocks thrown at the bus as we're leaving. It was a hostile environment because we were probably a 10-point underdog at least.
Or more,
in that game. But what we had and what proves out the rest of the season is we just had a knack for pulling these games out. The team nickname, among other things, was Cardiac Cougars. We had 5 overtime games, but we then play, and this is why it was fortuitous, that same night, Central Phoenix City with James Joseph, who ended up playing at Auburn and in the pros, has a season-ending injury against Dothan High, so we don't have to face him the next week in Dothan. We win that game 10-0. Then we have a rematch with Robert E. Lee, Larry Ware, and Quentin Riggins, and Spence McCracken is their coach in Crampton Bowl, third round of the playoffs. It's 27-10 with 10 minutes to go. And Chris, I'm going to let you set the stage because our season is dwindling. It's almost to a nothing. And at that point, the Lee starters, our shoulder pads are off, and they're talking to their friends in the stands.
Well,
go
ahead, Chris Lee.
No, he's talking to you.
No, I was talking to you, 63.
Well, I thought that's what you were referring to, and the funny thing is, it's one of those things that came out that I don't always remember as well as everybody else. But we're backed up, and we're probably on our 10-yard line, and we hadn't played well, and they were just driving the ball. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy. Driving the ball like crazy, and we couldn't seem to stop them. And I think we got in the huddle, and what did you say, Bernard? You said something, and I said, all right, guys, we got them right where we want them. Let's just go forward and let's win. I don't think our team ever thought we were going to lose. That was the thing that that I remember the most about our team was never the situation that we were ever going to lose. We were always going to win and never thought anything about we would lose. And so even though we were down, getting beaten, I remember they Quentin Riggins ran the touchdown back all the way off the kickoff. And it never entered my mind that we were going to lose. And so
I'd love to tell you that my words of inspiration in that huddle propelled. I don't think I said a whole lot other than "Shut up, Rufus," but we just for the next 10 minutes caught lightning in a bottle, and David Hogan couldn't be stopped. Lee never changed their defense from a 5-man line, one linebacker, made no sense. We score 3 touchdowns, and win the game 28-27. But not without a little excitement. On the 3rd touchdown, we go for 2. And
that is the funniest thing, Bernard.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And I knew back then you couldn't run or return a fumble or an interception back on defense for any points. My pass gets tipped, it goes to Chris Holmes, gets tipped. Quentin Riggins catches it and starts running the other way out of his own end zone. Well, if you look on the film, I walk off the field. I could have tackled or at least pushed him out of bounds, but I just, anyway. But then you see Hogan chasing behind him for 97 yards before catching him on about the 3.
Yeah,
and both of them just fall out. Well, it turns out Lee got penalized for delay of game from that. We kick off. About 3 plays later, they do a double pass that, thank goodness, Derek Flowers, I think, and Mike Henry were there. One made the hit, one made the recovery, and that sealed the game. But until that sealed the game, we were on pins and needles the rest of that through that time period.
Bernard, you got to describe it right. When you see him running down the sideline, down the edge, Bernard's in front of him, not behind him, in front of him.
Yeah.
And he literally looks at him and takes a step forward to avoid hitting him. In the film, it's amazing. And
Mom
so
didn't raise no fool. I didn't want to get hurt.
Everybody's going, Bernard, what did you tackle?
And I'm buddies with Quentin today, and he's an awesome fella. And I don't tease him too much about it. Every once in a while, I'll send him just the clip of that play. But he was, he's done wonderful things. He's now head of the board of trustees at Auburn. But that game then put us into the 4th round against Fairhope. Muddy, sloppy game. Lawrence is on top of his game where I was not. I dropped I fumbled a snap. Lawrence picks it up, dives over the top. Clark kicks an overtime field goal, and puts us in the state finals. Again, we're the last place team in the playoffs. We go play against Huffman High School out of Birmingham that had Philip Doyle and a whole bunch of studs. And apparently they had not scouted us very well because they didn't see our passing game come to light, because we put the game out of reach after Shane, what I think to be the most important play in the history of the Northview football program. And I'm going to let you start by sharing Bobby Estes' hit, because that's what started the play.
Well, it was they ran sort of like an option sort of offense, I think. They were going down the line, and the quarterback pitched it out to the running back, and Bobby, who played defensive tackle, I think, got a hand on it, and it hit the ground and bounced up right into Aristotle's hands. He picked it up and just went. And it was what? It was 80 plus 90 yards.
It was not, I think 91 yards.
91.
And he had an escort, one of the Flowers guys, maybe Derek, and somebody else, and they went all the way. And before that, they had already run down and scored on us on the first drive, and they were about to score again. Then that happens, and then we reel off 4 straight touchdowns, and we didn't know what to do, Maddox. By the middle of the 4th quarter, we're up so much, it's 32-7 or 32-8. We didn't know what to do with ourselves at that point, but it was always Coach Parrish's plan to play everybody on the roster in the game. So he felt comfortable enough by about the 8-9 minute mark or 8 minute mark in the fourth quarter, we were done. So everybody,
Well, I'm sure Maddox didn't know what to do either. He had been those guys up there in the stands sweating out the games, and hey, we've got this one in hand. I mean, what were they doing? What were y'all doing up there, Maddox?
Yeah, we were like, holy cow. I mean, because, the one thing some of us who followed high school football understood, there had been a huge upset in the other side of the bracket in the semifinal when J.O. Johnson lost because they were
Yep.
they were supposed to be it on a stick, right? I mean, everybody was playing for second place supposedly, and they got knocked out of the semis by Huffman, and so we rolled into Legion Field that day thinking, hey, it's at least a coin toss. We got a chance to win this thing, and then it got y'all put it out of control fairly quickly after, like you said, Bernard, after the AOK run back. So then it was just fun. They were just heckling Huffman kids. I mean, we were just, it was just fun at that point in time.
But didn't Huffman beat the team in Michigan, or was that J.O. Johnson that beat the team?
J.O. Johnson beat Moeller out of Cincinnati. Moeller was the powerhouse out of Cincinnati, and J.O. had played them earlier that year. By the time J.O. and Huffman played in the semifinals, USA Today, I think, had J.O. Johnson ranked in the top 5 in the country.
The nation, yeah.
But let's back up 1 week before that game. After the Fairhope game, I went with my family up to Legion Field, the same place we played the next week. And do you remember what happens Thanksgiving weekend on that Saturday back then in Legion Field was, of course, the Iron Bowl. And Maddox, forgive me for a minute, but that was the Van Tiffen 53-yarder that won the game.
Yeah, I remember going on the field
Porter
and
was so
finding the
offside.
spot.
Say it again.
I remember going on the field and finding the spot, saying it was right here. He kicked it right here.
And did you find the spot where Kevin Porter was way offside as well?
How did you get into Auburn, Wood? I don't know.
I said that was before, Maddox. I said,
oh yeah, that's right. I forget. That was your
remember
pre-light days.
That Saturday was the Iron Bowl. 2 days later, the team comes up for practice at Legion Field because none of us had ever played on AstroTurf, much less been in a stadium that held, 60,000 or whatever it was back at the time. And Shane, I thought that was huge for us to be able to walk around and just get a feel for the turf because none of us had turf shoes.
No, we got new turf cleats just for that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I made 3 trips to Birmingham Saturday, Tuesday, and then we came up that Friday. Do you remember where we stayed?
Vaguely. Out.
We stayed at the Holiday
Airport.
At the airport.
Yeah.
Which I have no idea why Bubba chose that place. Maybe because the 81 team stayed there, but that was not in a good place in town.
We needed to stay in our rooms with the door locked.
That's exactly right. And
well,
we went to a movie. We went and saw, if I remember correctly, didn't we see Rocky IV at the theater? And that was out in Hoover. So we were all over town that Friday before the game. We come home, and then really I'm having some difficulties here. So I'm going to show you guys really just one picture from that night. So,
Bernard, do you remember you talked about the turf. Sorry, I was dealing with the boyfriend wanted to say goodbye. The shoes, you talked about the turf. Do you remember? Do you remember our Warriors shoes?
Now, talk about that picture, Rufus.
Oh gosh, that was immediately we came off the bus. That was 1 o'clock in the morning or something.
It was.
And we came off the bus, and all of a sudden we just grabbed each other. I think the Dothan Eagle was there, and that was just a great picture that came off right as we came off the bus.
Left to right, of course, that's Coach Harry Wayne Parrish.
Yeah.
Number 63 right there on the left, or going toward the middle. David Hogan in the middle, who had caught 9 touchdown passes in the playoffs. That's me. And then you got Kevin Collins over my head. Kevin ended up playing at Auburn, and he was one of our other linemen. But that picture made the Dothan Eagle. I want to say it may have been the front page, or at least the front page of the Sports. I can't remember which it was. but it was, when you reach the mountaintop and you really don't, you dream about it. You see that the team in 81, when we were in 8th grade, did it, but it was surreal for a long time, at least to me, that we had done what we did.
Yeah, I remember when I guess we were probably in 10th grade, working out or something. Coach Parrish showed us that video that was made of the 81 team,
Mhm.
playing their games and then celebrating after. And I don't remember who it was for them, but they were running around holding the Northview Cougars flag, running around the field. And I was like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And I remember specifically me and Rufus running around the field. That was the moment that just stood out for me because I was like, we made it.
Well, if I'd have been on my game, I would have pulled up that photo of you and Rufus and I think Manny Venegas running around the stadium post game celebration.
Yeah.
And I also remember the picture. That's just dumb luck when I ran over to the sideline. Carrie and I think was it Karma?
No, it was Elizabeth. It's a
Elizabeth,
fantastic
the
picture.
cheerleaders, and
Yeah.
what a great time because they had such a great time. The cheerleaders had a great experience.
Yeah.
Now they had to have heart failure during the game trying to cheer for us during all those times, but the cheerleaders were awesome.
Bruce Lee flirting with cheerleaders? Come on now.
Give me
They
a
were the
break.
good cheerleaders.
Come on now.
And
Y'all expect
guys,
our people to
I'll
believe.
I'll post some of those photos in the comments. You guys can see them after the fact. But I want to welcome. We got Bud Young, who was part of the 81 team, with us. Hey, Bud, thanks for hanging in there with us. We got our buddy Tyler Chastain, who you guys all met when later at Vanderbilt. He's over in Knoxville. We got Barry Spears. We got Malcolm Williams. Thank you all for hanging out with us for a little bit tonight. There was, after we got home, it just seemed like the celebrations just went on and on and on, at least in my mind. I don't remember doing any more schoolwork or really even caring at that point. And that was the first week of December. And somebody in this panel had his 19th birthday, I think the next day or the day of the game. I don't know. It's one of these
Day
guys.
of.
18th or 21st or 30th. Which one was it?
His AARP card showed up in the mail when he got home on Sunday. But that was, we all have those days in our lives, good, bad, or whatever, that are memorable to us and for that stick with you for the rest of your life. And one of my most vivid memories from high school is post game. Everybody's celebrating on the field. They just announced that Hogan was the MVP, so they're giving him the trophy and all that's going on. And I just remember standing close to midfield and just kind of looking around. Nobody was standing with me at the time. Everybody was near me. But one of my favorite memories from sports is just absorbing what everybody else was doing. And it's just one of those core memories that I have. And I do remember seeing the two of y'all with Manny running around and everybody crying for joy and celebrating with all the friends on the field. So it's just one of those things that we were fortunate to be where we were and accomplish what we did.
I also remember always, and this was before then, but a lot of the home games, I'd stand there with Rufus when they'd play the alma mater. Mm-hmm. And I would just kind of take that in, our senior year going, there's only so many of these left. And just, making a memory.
Yeah, well, that was always special, Shane. I remember watching that and the alma mater and the anthem, just because that's what we did.
And then Rufus would try to give me a big kiss on the cheek at the end. I don't know if I did that.
Well, you look like a cheerleader, so I don't know what else to say.
Speaking of Rip Hughes on Friday nights and smelling the bread across the parking lot and all the traditions and everything that we did, how quickly did the three of y'all leave Rip Hughes to either go pick up dates, shower and change, or whatever you did to get to wherever the dance was held that night? How much priority was that?
Oh,
Yeah, I
that'll
got a couple of tickets on that night. I had several of those nights, 3 years running. Got
going
from the same officer.
and going back to the other though, Rip Hughes was just such an electric audience. I mean, we had the best fans. I mean, the student section, there were times you look up there and you're like, I think they're having way more fun than we are playing the game.
Well, well, given most of the games
Maddox,
we played
Donnie
in,
Morris, I mean, they were all, it was just, it was
Was
just
it
so
John
cool.
Cook, Nick Shimoda, and,
There-
and I don't remember. Was it Donnie in the T-shirt? Remember they had the NHS and
and there was a cheer that they made up that season.
they were
Was still
amazing.
used later, I think, wasn't it, Maddox?
Yeah, we raised a little cane up there in the stands because you have to talk smack to the opposing fans student section, and the only two that really ever showed up were Dothan was always strong in attendance for the game and Enterprise when it was a refuse, but you had to stir it up a little bit and talk a little smack as a I say talk meaning yell across the entire field. But we got a little organized up there, and we had some good times up there on Friday nights at what they affectionately refer to now as the Rip in Dothan.
Yeah.
But it was that whole section, the far right section.
Mhm.
It was amazing.
It
Well,
was.
and as the season progressed and our season improved, our record improved, the stands, which were always pretty full, became very full by the time we hit the playoffs. That's for sure.
But what was the cheer though, Maddox? It was like 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody hit the floor. Come on, you know it.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly. It was
And there was the do the
put me on the
snake
spot,
part, and
Shane.
everybody was doing this.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it was. I'm embarrassed to say that. Thank you for embarrassing me, Wood. I
Yeah,
appreciate
I'm
it.
sorry. I really thought you were going to do it for us, and like,
Well, I would if I could remember.
I remember the weeks, many weeks after that in December, we get into the holidays, then into January, we're still celebrating. They're still honoring us locally. We get certain trophies and awards. And I remember when they presented us with the state championship trophy in the gym, the place, I thought the rafters and everything was just going to come down because that was by far the loudest I had ever heard the gym in one of those pep rallies.
I'll give props to Dr. Smith. Our principal was the one thing he did better than anything else, in my opinion. He understood how to generate school spirit, and those pep rallies and there was like palpable energy buzzing through the school when y'all went on that playoff run. I mean, it was electric inside that building, and Dr. Smith did an awesome job of he built that up, and he was just fantastic at doing that, and there was just a ton of school pride at Northview back then, and so yeah, those pep rallies were chaotic and awesome, and all the great words you can describe them with, and I just remember that the energy buzzing through the school was just incredible during those playoffs. It was crazy.
That also came from the teachers. Let's give them a lot of credit
Oh,
too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They were huge supporters of us.
oh yeah,
Of
the
all
whole
of
school.
us.
I mean,
I think they were supporters of not just the football team, that senior class. That senior class wasn't just the football team. It was that entire senior class was special.
oh yeah.
We came in as freshmen with about 600 of us in the freshman class. We were at about 325 by the time we graduated that June. Our baby Cougars ninth grade team, I'm going to show you this picture, had about 90 to 95 players on it. This is not going to show very well, but can you see that?
Yeah.
That's our freshman. Nope, that's the varsity. I lied. The ninth grade picture that
Come
looks.
on, Bernard.
Hold on. Hold on. I'll find it. I'm not very prepared tonight. I apologize, guys. I'll post it. My
But I
point
can't.
is,
I will say I
we
can't
go from-
understand like the teachers
Yeah.
Shirley C. and that whole group, they were extreme supporters.
Yeah.
Well,
Of
they
Miss
were
us.
at every
Spivey, I
game.
remember Miss Spivey always dressing in the colors and everything on game days.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Well, we go from the 90 players our senior year, we're down to 17 seniors. And it was a very talented, extremely smart group of guys and very athletically gifted. But it was kind of a little shock to me that we were down to 17 by the time our season rolled around. Not the whole team, but just our seniors. That picture that I showed you was the whole varsity. I mean, it was everybody. It was probably close to 100 or so. But spring break our senior year, I go to Europe with a smaller group. The three of y'all do something a little different. Where did y'all go?
We went on the cruise.
What does that mean? Where did you cruise? Where'd you go?
Somewhere in the Bahamas.
Does Chris Lee remember that?
And
I'm not saying anything.
how many were on this cruise from our senior year?
There was what, 40 of us maybe?
I was going to say probably between 30 and 40. Yeah.
Wow. And how many teachers or parents or adults supposed to be in charge of this
We
cruise?
had Miss Skipper was our sole chaperone. And if you never went on a trip with Miss Skipper as your chaperone, you missed out because she got us there safely and got us home safely. And we didn't
That
see a
was
lot
gonna
of her
be-
between those two periods of time.
The statute of limitations has not run on certain things in
Yeah,
international.
that's all
water.
I'll say about that is that we
So
went on the cruise.
I just want to know, did everybody come back safely?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Jay
Well-
Reed got to see certain parts of the ship that are reserved for other folks. And he had a big
Any
time.
point in time was he doing this?
I didn't see him, to be honest with you. I miss Jay.
Now, after spring break, we only have a few weeks till we graduate in early June. And I'm sure none of us remember doing anything academically oriented, but I do remember taking college trips with you guys and just going to the beach and just living it up until it was time to split that summer. Because once we graduated around the first week of June, 2 weeks later, I had elbow surgery. And then a week after that, I went up to Nashville. I did rehab, got into a class or two, and started just my football life up at Vanderbilt because I had, as you guys know, signed my scholarship in February. Baseball was not going to be in my cards going forward, but Vanderbilt thankfully had that scholarship for me. Do you have any recollections of that spring until we graduated? Because we had some fun trips. We had some fun times.
Oh yeah,
Yes, we
Jane,
did.
you remember any of the trips?
I do.
Which trip? Pulling it out of you.
I remember trips to the beach. I was just thinking back of that spring. It was a good time.
The one thing that always so stuck in my head from the year before, we all remember what happened with Brian Wilkerson. Remember senior skip day, our junior year, he gets into that horrible accident. Well, he wasn't able to play senior year baseball, and he was a very talented baseball player. And that was always a very sobering, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen moment. And I just remember that just always stuck in my head. I don't know if y'all remember that.
Yeah.
You certainly remembered it back in the day.
So who actually did senior skip day of this four?
I
did.
can't remember one way or the other.
I stayed home. I wasn't at the lake party, but I was like, I'm staying home.
You actually did senior skip day? Like, God,
I
the
did.
most conservative person I know in this world did senior.
I was gonna break out.
Golly, no, I was at school. And I know Chris Maddox was at school because his mama would have killed him.
Well, I was trying to keep my perfect attendance to exempt the one exam I was going to have to take. So,
Yes, I did that. That was English. Yeah. Ruth Hooks, I love her to death, but I was exempting Ruth Hooks' English class.
exactly.
Yep.
Well, that's what I was gonna to lead to some of our teachers were just so special, not just to our school, but to the students, and Ruth Hooks being certainly one of them. And I think in all fairness, because she said this before, Maddox, with you and I in her class senior year, I think she finally came around to not appreciating, but cutting us a little bit of slack for varsity athletes and still being able to handle the course load that she was providing, because she was teaching a college level class. We know that. She was phenomenal, and I'm forever grateful. But I don't think that whether it was varsity sports or any other extracurricular activities, I don't think that Miss Hooks really cared, because it all came second place. But I think that from what we did back then, I think it kind of opened her eyes that it could be done.
Yep.
You're the only two in AP.
No, we were the only two well, that's not true.
Mhm.
Joel White was in that class with us. There were three guys in that whole class.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because I remember even Calvin and I took honors. We were like, we're not doing AP.
yeah, it was a good
That's what I
decision,
took
by
was
the way.
honors.
And it turns out all y'all did was summer reading. Just so you know, I'm going on the record of saying all y'all did was summer reading, because this class schedule was the exact same. And I know Ruth is watching. It was. I got in trouble at that class.
You feel free to believe that. If that makes you sleep better at night, that's fine.
Well, Ruth will tell you, I got in trouble for, I got called. Do you remember she had her office on the side in the room? She was one of the only people. I got called to that office because we were reading Shakespeare, and there was a particular analogy where I think it was, I don't remember, Shakespeare gave his best bedroom to somebody, and I figured it out, and it was not pretty.
Hey, she walked me to the office to see Dr. Smith one day,
Mm-hmm.
which is way better than going to her office. I was
Well,
I was late getting to her class
mm-hmm.
because we had, back then there was a class for SGA, and as the SGA president, I had third period SGA with Ms. Glanton, and then I had fourth period Ms. Hooks, and I was late to Ms. Hooks' class one day because we were finishing up overseeing Dub 2 for a dance that was going to happen that night.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked in about 5 minutes late with a pass from the office saying that I was excused. And she turned me right around and we walked straight to the office and saw Dr. Smith. And so it was one of those deals where, Dr. Smith kind of listened to the, and look, I get it. She starts teaching. She doesn't want to be interrupted. I was late. I couldn't help it. And Dr. Smith looked at her and said, well, Ms. Hooks, you're just going to need to understand sometimes in his role as the SGA president, Mr. Maddox is going to be late for your class. And I kind of won the battle and lost the war at that minute.
Well, you did walk into her class going, I'm here.
I did not quite do that.
Guys, besides Miss Hooks, to me, Mr. Helms was very memorable to me. I took all the classes I could from him. Shane, who were some of yours? Who were some of your more memorable teachers?
Oh, Miss Spivey, Miss Glanton. I remember she would do the Jabberwocky. If you could get her to do it, it was great. Gosh, who all? I remember Mr. Hughes, but that was science.
And just as a note, Mr. Hughes recently passed away. I saw that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Mr. Hall did too. Do you remember Mr. Hall?
I misspoke. It was Mr. Hall. I apologize.
Okay.
Mr. Hall.
Okay. Yeah, because Mr. Hughes was really not much older. He was a really young teacher. I met him later, and I was like, oh, you really weren't a lot older than us, like we seem to think.
We graduate. We're about to go our separate ways, and we're all excited about college and what's next in our lives. And as it normally occurs, you kind of want to separate from your high school years because now you're getting into college. But I want to fast forward to now. what was it about your Northview years, those high school years, those coming of age, if you will, years that really have still made an impression on you, and that it really is, it puts a smile on your face from that time period? Rufus, you got something percolating there?
Well, I'd kind of reflect on kind of stuff why we did what we did, right? Good friends, good teachers, great class. I mean, we didn't recognize all the teachers. I remember Miss Hooks, Miss Cotton. I mean, there were so many people. But I mean, what little people watching this do is we still keep in touch with each other. We still rely on each other. Um, it was just different. I don't know. I mean, it was a great class. I still talk to Pat Fitch. I still talk to a lot of people. Um, it was a different time. And it's special, and I appreciate it.
Jane?
Like Rufus said, I mean, we were part of a great group of people, and it was just a special time. But looking back, I mean, I think it was a special time at Northview, but it was just a special time in history. I mean, being a child of the '80s, the music, the movies. I mean, my kids look back now and go, "Gosh, Dad." I mean, the movies they love, a lot of the movies they love, the music they love is from that era because they've heard me talk so nostalgic about it, and then share memories. And both of mine are going. Well, my daughter graduated. My son is still there. It's Dothan High School now, but it's in the in Northview building, and just sharing memories and moments and things about teachers and just about the place. So I still feel those memories when I go to that place. Just, I'll think of all the great friends and keeping in touch with all you guys. I mean, it's just, uh, it just was a great time. And we were very blessed to have that situation because, like Chris has shared, not everybody has that experience.
Well,
We were just very fortunate, and I think living in a small town, close knit town like Dothan played a part of that as well. Just a special time and place.
Maddox, I don't think either one of them could have said it any better, but not everybody has those warm, fuzzy feelings from childhood and into high school. And I'm not implying that you don't, but not everybody wants to relive that time. But what is it for you that when you reflect back that is of fond memories or recollections?
Well, those two guys just kind of hit on it. I mean, for me, it was just, of course, coming from the small class that I was a part of with Chris Lee at Houston Academy, and then hitting that what seemed to be a gigantic high school. Right? I mean, not only the campus itself, but the number of, like you said, we started with 500 or 600 kids in our freshman class, and to the thought of where you grow from being a freshman to graduating, and how the campus shrinks and the class size shrinks, and you get to know so many people. And they're right, we really did have a great class. I mean, we really did. And we really grew up in I've got two of my children that say to me all the time, "Gosh, I wish I'd gone to school in the '80s." I mean, it was just I don't know. It was just, we were lucky we had a great class. We were lucky we all, have stayed close and gotten to be such good friends. And, you can not see somebody from this class in 10 years and then bump into them at a mall or wherever. And you just immediately catch up. I mean, there's just never an awkward moment when you're around people that were in this class that graduated with us in '86. So I just, I just I loved everything about it. I mean, I really did. And I'm a weirdo like that, I guess, but it was just an awesome experience.
I don't think you're weird. I think you just hit on the conscience of all four of us, in that we're pre-internet, we're pre, and I hate to say this, mass shootings and all of the things that have come forward over the decades to today's society. And it's easy to say this, but life was simpler during our childhood. we didn't have as much to worry about as teenagers do, I would think, today. And most notably with social media and cell phones and those things, it hits very close to home for a lot of kids. And they're not as, I don't know if it's the right word, they're not as innocent as we were back in the day.
I guess
And-
now we're sounding our age, aren't we?
Well, yes, but we're not, I didn't tell anybody to get off my lawn yet. I mean, but I think,
I will say this. Can I say this, Bernard? So
yeah,
last week we were moving stuff as we're dealing with age, and we're moving stuff from one place to the other. And I hadn't talked to John Coleman in many years, and sent him a text and needed his services of his company, and everything was perfect.
Mhm.
And his team and everything was so. We got connections that you don't even realize you'll need until I needed last week. And
Yeah.
so I appreciated John Coleman and his group, somebody from high school that was able to help me in a situation that I needed to deal with.
Well, fellas, we've come to the conclusion of tonight's conversation, and just y'all have brought up some things I hadn't thought about in a long time, and it just this was a good one. There's some pretty good stories that weren't shared, some pretty good stories that were hinted about, and some pretty good stories that were shared. I think that everybody says that their senior year is the best year ever. We had the best class. Well, I want y'all to somebody prove me wrong that the '86 class at Northview was not the best that's come through the school. But I want to thank you guys again for just going down memory lane. And we will hopefully meet back up sometime soon for episode 5, the college years, to take the Circle City goats and dogs and bring it to a close sometime soon.
Good night.
It's been a blast, Bernard.
Shane, you can now go to bed. You can lay down now.
Oh, man, I've been fighting these yawns. So
Good night, guys. We'll see y'all again soon.
see ya.